Hey, folks, this is Mike Messier. I'm here with my buddy Jimmy Faluca. We're just making sure that we're on live. I know that some folks have been looking forward to this, as I have. We're starting a couple of minutes late. Sorry about that. My buddy Laza from Australia will be checking in, I'm sure. And unfortunately, hi, this is Mike Messier. I'm here with Jimmy Faluca. Jimmy, where are you tonight, buddy?
Where am I? I'm in Staten Island, New York. I'm in my backyard enjoying the beautiful summer weather.
I unfortunately, Jimmy and I are here under sad circumstances. But earlier in the summer, Jimmy and I did a podcast together where we talked about some great summertime wrestling memories. And on that episode, Jimmy, I discussed Terry Funk, and
You did?
that's why we're here, because unfortunately Terry Funk passed away just a couple of days ago, and then literally yesterday we got word that a personal favorite of yours and someone that I had the utmost respect for as a professional wrestler, Wyndham Rotunda, aka Bray Wyatt, passed away at the unbelievable young age of 36. And just so that the fans know, Jimmy and I have done a few podcasts in the past, and Jimmy has always been an outspoken advocate for Bray Wyatt. And he goes into the wrestling groups that we're both part of in Facebook. And many times Jimmy has laid out, the good things that they're doing with Bray Wyatt. Sometimes they haven't used him properly. I'm talking about the WWE, of course, and the potential that this guy has had. And some of that potential's been hit. Some of it, unfortunately, wasn't. But Jimmy, I'm going to turn the mic over to you, buddy. First of all, how are you doing with this? And I know that we're just fans of these guys. We're not their personal friends. But as a fan, how are you taking the bad news of Bray Wyatt's passing?
Well, I can tell you, for me, I feel like I got punched in the stomach, and I'm not apologetic about saying that because, as fans, and I've seen a couple people mention this today online, unless you're a fan of this business, you don't really understand how hard it hits when someone who is obviously exceptionally good at this dies, how it affects the fandom. Because as fans, we understand the sacrifices that they make to do that job. You don't see your children. You're going through marriages left and right potentially. You possibly fall into bad habits, all in the name of living the dream of being a wrestler. And I'm sure anyone who's been a fan at one point or another said to themselves, I'm sure even you have said this to yourself, you know what I could do? I would love to be in that business. I'd love to do this in some capacity. I know I've said it many times that if I wasn't tied to my family as tight as I am, and as tied to my friends as I am, I would have wanted to be an announcer or a manager because I'm not athletically gifted enough to be a great wrestler, and I'm not willing to do the extreme shit that a lot of these other guys are willing to do. So I would have loved, if I was a loner and I lived on my own and I didn't have any close ties to anyone, I would absolutely be in this business, and I would have been an announcer, and I would have loved to have called some of the stuff that Bray Wyatt did in his career. He was a throwback to what wrestling, in my view, because we all have different viewpoints, but he was a throwback for what wrestling should be, in my view. And when I say that, I mean he was a character. He had a shtick. His character was not about going out there doing 50 somersaults and flipping and kicking with no. His character was about psychology. His character was about getting into the head of his opponent. And toward the end, the way I looked at him was he stood for, it's okay to not be okay sometimes. Especially that promo he cut when he came back
Yeah.
last year and he went on SmackDown and he cut, in my book, what was one of the greatest, if not the greatest promo of his career, where he told the crowd, "You saved my life." And that promo hits a little harder now. Um, I'm not taking it well because my sister Nicole, who's a big wrestling fan like all of us, and is an incredible artist. If you see her stuff, I'm not just saying it because she's my kid's sister. She's exceptionally talented if you look at her stuff. she was very, very close with Wyndham and his family. She would talk to several members of his family on a monthly basis. They would check on her. Hey, how you doing? We just saw Wyndham and he was talking about you, which was, that these wrestlers have busy lives. So the fact that her name was constantly brought up in his home, and the amount of times that she got to meet him, I know what it meant to her. And to see how brokenhearted she was, I was cleaning my apartment, and then my sister comes into my apartment, a crying mess, and I'm sad to say, without knowing, I knew. The second I saw the look on her face, because if it was a family member, I'd have got calls from my parents, my grandparents, or somebody. When I saw that look on her face, I just knew, and I felt like someone punched me in the gut. And I'm 33 years old myself.
Sure.
So to know that at 36, with 4 children, a wife, and his parents and his siblings, it really puts in perspective how mortal we all are. Because like that, it could be over. And as a fan of his, and I want this to be made clear, because I know to some this may not be received well,
Sure.
but I need to speak my truth.
Please do.
As a fan, the human being I'm brokenhearted for, because I can only imagine the sorrow that his parents are going through. As a father myself, I'd rather be dead than not have my sons. That's it. There's no fixing that. His wife, I couldn't imagine living without my wife. My wife has made me a better man. I've said that to you many times. And to lose a sibling, please. My sister and I have been thick as thieves since the day she was born. But speaking strictly as a wrestling fan, I'm pissed off because the guy never got to reach his full potential. And there was a shit ton of potential in this guy. I've been saying that since he was in NXT, that this guy could easily be the next generation psychological character. And here's what I mean. In the 80s, we had Kevin Sullivan and Jake the Snake Roberts. In the 90s, we had The Undertaker, Kane, and when he first showed up, Mankind. These dark characters that you connected with because they were good. They were so good at being bad, you loved them. And to me, when I looked at the Bray Wyatt character, especially the cult leader, the reason I felt that character had so much mileage in it is because unlike an undead zombie or a being that could control fire, he was a character that could actually happen. And the most frightening picture I've ever seen of the Bray Wyatt character is where he's standing on a rock of some kind and there are tons of hands reaching out to him. Because we all know, for anyone that has studied psychology or studied serial killers, that can happen. You can have someone who has such charisma that they create a following that makes them that could be dangerous. So when I saw his character, I said, this is cool because this is something that could actually happen. And they started him off great. He beat Kane in basically an Inferno match. He had a pretty damn good rivalry with Daniel Bryan where they had a match of the year candidate at the Rumble.
Yep.
Then the next month, the WWE has the greatest 6-man tag that they ever had. There's been a lot of great 6-man tags in Japan, in the NWA, and even in AEW. But the 6-man tag that the Wyatt family had with the Shield was the greatest 6-man tag I ever saw under the WWE banner. And what made that match so special to me was that these were 6 relatively new guys.
Yes.
They were not singles competitors. But before they even touched, the building was buzzing. The crowd wanted to see this. And it was phenomenal. It was one of the greatest matches that I saw in WWE at that time. And then unfortunately, Bray got, I hate to say it this way, but he got fed to John Cena, not just at WrestleMania, but in a program. And I take my dislike for the man out of it because I feel I'm
Cena.
comfortable enough to be objective. Yes, Cena. John Cena didn't gain anything from beating him, so it shouldn't have happened. You know how I feel about The Undertaker. I have a tattoo with his symbol. It's the Grim Reaper with Taker's symbol as the shield.
Nice.
I love Taker to death. The streak was already over. He shouldn't have beat Bray Wyatt at WrestleMania 31, nor should he and Kane have beat him and Luke Harper. Then he has an interaction with The Rock where he gets made to look bad. Then he wins the belt in an Elimination Chamber match, and the audience exploded for it. His first appearance on SmackDown as the champion, the crowd embraced him like he was a hero, even though he was a villain. And I feel that was because they felt this guy is so good. How is he not at that level? And then not even a month later, he drops the belt to Randy Orton.
At Mania.
Then he reinvents himself as the Fiend. He takes all the nonsense that happened to him, strips himself of that character, creates a brand new one, and it's an overnight sensation. He makes them a ton of money in merchandise. The ratings and the views were all in his favor. And then the Hell in a Cell fiasco happens.
Right.
And then the Goldberg fiasco happens. And then he gets fed to Orton again and then gets fired. So, as I mentioned, when he came back last year at Extreme Rules, and he got that incredible ovation after being gone for almost 2 full years. You know, Steve Austin has said many times, when you're out of sight, out of mind in this business, that's career suicide because the fans move on.
Right.
But they didn't. Not from him. And I felt that was validation for him and for anyone who was a fan of his, as if to say, after all this time he was gone, he got a Road Warrior-like pop. And you know the Road Warriors are my favorite tag team of all time, and I don't use that phrase often. But that ovation he got in Philadelphia was one I will never forget as long as I live. And I felt that was validation that, hey, this is what you could have had. And what hurts as a fan is that he will never get the chance to right all of those wrongs, because he very easily could have been what The Undertaker meant to this generation. I am not saying he should have won every single match. We all know that's unrealistic. But I felt that they should have did a better job of presenting him like a legitimate threat, not someone that just talks a big game and then can't back it up. And I felt we were going to get that this time with the way his character was being presented, how they were allowing him to connect with the audience. They weren't trying to force him as a heel. They were allowing him to be him. And then he had the match at the Royal Rumble with LA Knight, which, you know, I'll be objective, it really wasn't that good. Not to me. It wasn't
the Mountain Dew pitch black match.
Yeah, to me, it wasn't Bray's best work, but that's not what really this is about. And then he was gone, because he got sick. And then 2 weeks ago, I heard about him battling a life-threatening illness. I said, "Oh my goodness, God only knows what this is." And props to the WWE for keeping it under wraps, the same way AEW did with Brody Lee. God rest his soul. I have to applaud the WWE for keeping a lid on this, because the man and his family deserve their privacy. And to know that he's gone hurts. It hurts me as a fan of his. It hurts me as someone that had the opportunity to actually meet him, talk to him. He treated me so well, all because I went with my sister to meet him. And she pointed at me and said, "That's my brother." Told me, he said, "You get over here right now." He treated me like I was royalty. And I told him, I said, "Listen, you're easily my favorite wrestler of the modern age." And then he asked me who my favorites were, and I showed him the tattoo. He's like, "Ooh, I've sat under his learning tree a few times." And I told Bray Wyatt straight up that I was never a fan of the idea of breaking the streak. But if someone should have, it should have been you. And I told him that to his face. And his words to me were, "No one can have that now, but the changing of the guard is coming, and he knows that because I told him." And I think that's why The Undertaker respected him so much. You know, Taker's not going to go into a segment with someone that he
Right.
doesn't highly respect. And the last time we saw The Undertaker was him with Bray Wyatt in the ring.
The Whisper.
And the whisper that Bray said, it's between me, him, the devil, and God. And I will take that. And Bray said, I will take that, what he said to me, to my grave. And unfortunately, he will. And to know that my all-time favorite wrestler, his last moment was with my modern favorite wrestler.
Right.
It brings me a small sense of comfort. And all I can really say is my condolences go out not only to his wonderful family who adored him, not only to the legions of fans that loved him, but to all the wrestlers who were close to him and that loved being around him. I know what it's like to lose a friend, and I don't envy them. It's just a very sad situation, Mikey, and this one's going to hurt for a while.
It is, and unfortunately, a wonderful tribute, Jimmy, and you made some points that I want to go back to in a minute, but also this week, and it's unbelievable what a horrible week this was for wrestling fans.
Absolutely.
And hopefully, yeah, because we also lost Terry Funk, and we have a Facebook user, and I do appreciate everyone that's watching live with the comments, and I'm not sure who the Facebook user is, but the quote is from Terry Funk, who also passed away this week. And it's crazy, Jimmy, that Terry Funk's death is basically in the shadows now of Bray Wyatt's death. But we'll get into that in a minute. But here's the quote from the Facebook user from Terry Funk. My daddy was a should I try to do it, Terry Funk? My daddy was a pistol. I'm a son of a gun. I'm meaner than a rattlesnake, tougher than shoe leather, more dangerous than a hollow-eyed scorpion, and middle-aged and crazy, but crazy like a fox. And thank you, Terry. And great quote.
And Terry Funk, man. I mean, that dude was special. He was a chameleon. And
yes.
This is how I always describe Terry Funk. He was like The Undertaker and Chris Jericho. And here's what I mean. He evolved as the years went on. This guy was in the NWA. He was the NWA champion. When he beat Jack Briscoe,
right,
with a small package, he beat Jack Briscoe, who was the NWA champion for a few years, and just like his brother Dory Funk Jr. won the NWA championship. And I was so happy when I saw that, because Terry's father said that Terry would never be NWA champion because his brother was the champion.
Right.
And Terry, he fought his way through the ranks. He earned the right. He drew the money, and he became NWA champion. And one of the reasons I bought the NWA championship when I did, before it was destroyed, unfortunately, was because of Terry Funk.
You mean like a replica title?
A replica of the NWA championship, but it's being replaced. My future brother-in-law is replacing it for me. But the four reasons I got that NWA championship was Harley Race, Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, and Terry Funk. Terry Funk was one of the best of his time in an era that was loaded with talented performers. Then he goes from that to being the psychotic Texan. I will never forget seeing the video of him interviewing Ric Flair after Ric Flair just had a classic with Steamboat in Nashville, Tennessee, and he Colt Cox Flair, pile drives him through the table, and he turned into the villainous Terry Funk and had a great rivalry with Flair. I think the Great Muta and Sting got mixed up in that.
Well, Jimmy, you're hitting the sweet spot, because I did do a 40-minute tribute to Terry Funk the night that he passed, and I was there for that match in Baltimore, the 1989 Great American Bash, a young Mike Mistake, and I have original photos from that event, and I have original autographs from that event, and
those are treasures,
I met Terry Funk. Well, let's put it this way. So it was basically Flair and Funk had this brutal match. They allowed blood in this match, which was against the Baltimore State Athletic Commission, but they got a waiver. And basically what happened was Flair and Funk have their match. Flair wins with a small package once again. And then Great Muta and Gary Hart come out. And then up until that point, Terry Funk, this was his first time with Gary Hart as a manager, who was also managing Muta.
Love
So
that
Muta comes,
combination. Love that
yes,
combination because Gary Hart was a great manager.
yeah. So Muta comes in, sprays Flair, who's already bloody with the green mist. So now Flair looks like a Christmas tree. He's green and red. And then Sting, who had been one of Nature Boy's contenders and rivals, comes in to make the save because Sting had just fought Muta for the first time that night. And Jimmy, on the official Ted Turner Home Entertainment videotape, they actually edited out a good portion of that brawl that they had. But if you ever find the actual pay-per-view feed, it was like a 20-minute after-match brawl that the four guys had.
I've seen it online because you have to remember Sting's my second favorite of all time, and I love the rivalry between Terry Funk and Flair. So I have seen that footage in its entirety, and let me tell you something. If that happened today, people would have ate it up. They would have ate it up because all four guys were great. I mean, Muta was phenomenal when he was younger. Sting, even though I prefer him from his late 90s version, was great when he was the Surfer Sting. I don't have to tell you about Ric Flair, and I don't have to tell you about Terry Funk.
Yeah, and if people, like I said, we're going to wrap this up, folks, right at 8 o'clock because we know everybody wants to watch SmackDown. Javier Oist, my buddy Javier Oist is a great guy, and I believe it's One Pro Wrestling Stories that Javier writes for. If Javier is still there, if you want to put the link, Javier, please do, buddy, to your website.
Thank you for joining us, sir.
Yes, Javier is a great guy. I'm not sure if you're connected with him on Facebook, Jimmy, but you should be.
But if he's a friend of yours, then he's a friend of mine.
Yeah, he's a great guy too. So after the Flair Funk match, and bro, this is before cell phones were even a thing. Mm-hmm. Me and my pack of associates went to the hotel to look for the wrestlers. We weren't trying to be their girlfriends like I'm sure a lot of women were. We were just trying to get some autographs as young kids trying to get some autographs. But we go to this hotel and a big, Cadillac or a luxury car pulls up, and out of the back seat comes Terry Funk, and he's about 30 minutes out from this pay-per-view. He's got his cowboy hat on, he's got a white towel around his bare-chested neck, and I believe it or not, he was actually wearing the chaps. Okay, and I'm looking up to this guy as a little kid, and I'm like, "Hey, can I get an autograph?" And he's, "I'll be right back." And he never came back, but that was okay because 20 years later, I met him in Massachusetts, and I talked about that.
About this the last time we were together. You told us, oh man.
Yeah, the picture in the background now that people can just see in between us is of a picture I took of Terry in the Providence Civic Center. My mom actually drove me to the Providence Civic Center. We were expecting to see Andre the Giant versus Magnificent Morocco. Andre was a no-show, but Terry Funk, I believe, beat George Weld on the undercard and had a great time. Let me get to some here's the difference, I think, Jimmy, and I just want to make a couple of points. We might have to meet again in a couple of days to do another one of these because I don't want to cut this conversation short, and I love talking wrestling with you.
Oh, thank you, sir.
You got it. So we'll plan on doing a part 2 in a couple of days, but
that's fine.
I want to make a point that this is a couple of points. In my 10 years as a wrestling fan, there's many deaths, Road Warrior Hawk, we can go into all of the premature deaths of the wrestlers, but there's kind of a lineage that stands out to me of a certain type that's really not mainstream guys that everybody knows, like even casual fans know, but the hardcore wrestling fans. Let me share this lineage with you, Jimmy, and see what you think. I see it as David Von Erich. I believe that was 1984. Then I see Brian Pillman, 1997.
I remember.
Then I see Eddie Guerrero's passing away, I believe, in 2005.
You're correct. That was my wife's favorite wrestler.
Yeah, and then I see, you can kind of put them as a team, but I kind of put Brody Lee and Bray Wyatt, and I guess especially Bray Wyatt, I put them as this generation's Eddie Guerrero, and this is not to take away things like Owen Hart's passing. and Bruiser Brody, but those were extreme cases. Like their situations were
one was an
right,
accident and one was intentional.
right. But I'm talking about just wrestlers who were big time wrestlers, but weren't really, movie stars, or they weren't crossover acts like a John Cena.
They were exclusive pro wrestlers that were just exclusive to the business, and it shows what impact they had just from the outpour of support that they've had from the fans and the talent alike. I mean, I've never heard anyone say a cross word about Brody Lee, and I haven't
Right.
heard anyone say anything bad about Bray either. And maybe this would be a good way. It's up to you to close the show with this. One of my favorite podcasters that I listen to every Sunday. The show is called The Solid Monster Sounds Off. It's a pretty good show.
Brian Solid Monster.
I've been listening to that show. I listen to Jason every Sunday. I've been listening to him since 2013. It's a good show. He's very objective, which is why I respect him. But he told this story that one time Bray Wyatt was driving with JTG, and apparently there was another vehicle driving next to them rather recklessly, and their vehicles collided, and the other vehicle turned over on its back. So Bray, who was driving, pulled over and got out of the car to see what was going on, and he heard crying coming out of the car. JTG didn't want to move because he saw the car was smoking, so he probably thought it was going to explode or something. Bray opened the door and pulled a bunch of teenagers out of the car.
Wow.
And they were begging him, please don't tell our parents, please don't tell our parents. And he just said, no, I just want to make sure you are okay. He and JTG got back in the car. Bray never spoke about that ever again. He never publicized it. He never tried to capitalize on what he did. He just did it because it was the right thing to do. JTG told this story. Bray's never even discussed it. That just tells me the kind of human being he was outside of the ring, which I already knew he was a good person just based on how he treated my sibling. And then you get to Terry Funk. The guy sacrificed how many years off of his body when he helped put ECW on the map, when he made Cactus Jack the king of the death match in IWA Japan. I don't think people understand the impact Terry Funk had on this industry. Without ECW, you don't get Steve Austin. You don't get Mick Foley. You don't get the feel of the Attitude Era. Terry Funk was one of the most, and I'm sure you'll mirror this sentiment, one of the more unselfish top guys in wrestling, where most are, want to hang on to their spot. Terry was one of those guys. I could make this guy look good. I could do something good with him. And I have a certain love for Mick Foley. Mick Foley's in my top 10 favorite wrestlers of all time. And knowing what Terry did for him, I can only imagine how Mick is feeling knowing that his mentor, is gone. And I kind of know how Mick feels because my mentor in life passed from COVID a few years ago. He was my godfather. He was a pretty good guy. He was a pastor. He was a good man. So I got somewhat of an idea of what Mick's going through. But back to Bray, it kills me to know his life was only getting started. And it's sad. And that's why anyone that's watching this, Mr. Wyatt Rabbit, I mean no disrespect to RVD or to Tommy Dreamer or any of the ECW wrestlers. They all played their part.
No, he's saying that Terry Funk influenced all these guys and helped them break through is what he's saying.
Terry was a massive influence on all of them, and he was that ECW's first pay-per-view.
Right.
The main event was Terry Funk versus Raven, and that pay-per-view wouldn't have came off as well as it did if not for Terry Funk. And Paul Heyman has mirrored those sentiments, who was the man behind ECW. Tommy Dreamer, who was originally going to be in that spot, who willingly gave it up for Terry, openly admits that. So I'm not trying to diss or disrespect any of those guys because I have a great deal of respect for what they gave to the business, because being in ECW wasn't easy and they chose to be there.
Right.
But Terry deserves all the respect and love that he's getting. He should have been getting it years ago. And he was getting it to a degree.
He was.
Yeah. Terry. But as far as Bray is concerned, may he serve as an example to everyone. Call your friends, check up on them, the people that matter to you. Don't put it off. And especially, and this is just me personally, because I've had family members that had heart issues. If any of you ever don't feel right or something with your body doesn't feel right, get help. Don't put it off, because tomorrow's not guaranteed, folks. And God rest their souls. And I'm heartbroken for both of them.
Well said. I'm just going to give a few more points, and then we'll call it a wrap. We'll probably do this again early next week or sometime soon, Jimmy, because I think we've both got more to say, and I don't want to cut ourselves short.
I haven't even gotten started yet.
Yeah. You mentioned the Barely Legal show. If you see that T-shirt that I'm wearing right now, that's Sabu and
Sabu.
Well, yes. That's a photograph that I took at Barely Legal because I was there for that, and I saw Terry Funk win his ECW World Title. I believe his second one.
Century.
Yeah, I was there for. I was there to see Terry Funk challenge Hulk Hogan for the WWF World Title. I was there to see the Ric Flair Terry Funk Great American Bash. And I was there to see Terry Funk win the ECW World Title from Raven in '97, and so I have a lot of great Terry Funk memories. I also wanted to say that I did see Bray Wyatt wrestle at least, I believe, twice. I think I saw him and Cena in a ladder in a tables match in Providence. But what I really remember is going to the SmackDown where the Dudleys came back. The Dudleys, them coming back to SmackDown actually caused me to buy a ticket to see that show because I wanted to be there when the Dudleys came back to the WWE, I think in 2016. And the Bray Wyatt and the original Wyatt family were on the show, and they were super over. And the people were doing either their phones or the lighters. You know, if this was the 70s or the 80s, it would have been the lighters, but now it's the phones. And you can't buy that type of heat. You can't buy that type of over. Let me just pay respect. The Wyatt Rabbit, thank you. I don't think, I'm not going to put this up there, but Wyatt Rabbit says that there were some rumors that Bray was doing steroids. I honestly don't think so. I doubt it, and I'll tell you why, Wyatt Rabbit. His grandfather was Blackjack Mulligan. His grandfather was 325 pounds, 6'6". I actually saw this for the first time, Jimmy. Apparently, Bray Wyatt was doing a character that he never got off the ground called Axel Mulligan back in 2011 or 2012 in Florida.
Stunner back then.
Right. So, I mean, this guy had a lot more in him. The Fiend, the Bray Wyatt cult leader. I mean,
the mandible claw, for crying out loud, a move that's been dead for over 15 years, and he brought it back and got it over. Think about that. He got the mandible claw over again. That, to me, and that's a high level of respect from Mick Foley, that he was willing to not only allow him to use that move, but he was the first recipient of it.
Yeah. And I do want to give credit to the Wyatt Rabbit, and I thank you for joining us. I'm not new watcher here. I want to give you credit because
thank you.
He made a point here about all these guys, Sam Callahan, Darby Allin, all influenced by Bray, which is true.
Karrion Kross as well.
And he mentioned him as well. And also want to say that he wishes that Bray Wyatt lived to age 79 like Terry Funk. And I think, Jimmy, for me, because unfortunately I've had several friends and family members pass away in the last 5 or 6 years. And to me, I try to celebrate how people lived and the quality of life that they had. And with Terry Funk, it's A's across the board. He was married to the same lady for decades. They had 2 daughters, at least. I'm not sure if they had other kids, but they had 2 daughters they were very proud of. And like you said, Jimmy, not to harp on the negative, but with Bray, with Wyndham Rotundo, named after one of my favorite wrestlers, his uncle, Barry Windham, because his father is Mike Rotundo, IRS. His tag team partner at WrestleMania 1 is Barry Windham, the U.S. Express, the first team to use the song Real American. That's the lineage of this guy, of Bray Wyatt. And
Blackjack Mulligan was one of the toughest sons of bitches that ever came into this business.
Yeah.
I mean, who messed with Blackjack? Nobody.
Right. Right, and for that matter, Barry Windham, his uncle, Wyatt Rabbit. If you look into, I mean, I'm a big Barry Windham fan, so he was 300 pounds, 6'6". Mike Rotundo, I mean,
Was a pretty tall guy.
yeah, I think he was 6'4", and so I
That
don't.
family's naturally big. They're
They're
naturally
just,
big.
yeah. When he was called Husky Harris, and I really didn't know too much about the Husky Harris, but he did a backstage little promo with Michelle McCool, and you could, even with the crap script that they gave from NXT, hey, do you believe in love at first sight? Well, I'll walk by you again. Husky Harris says that to Michelle, but there's the voice is coming through of Bray Wyatt, and it's like, this guy was a star all along, man. They just had to take the dust off the gem. Jimmy, I'm going to let you go. My shout out to your sister. I know she's going through a lot. I want to hear more about that relationship, how that started on the next time. We'll probably hook up early next week whenever you're available, and we'll do these topics justice. In the meantime, everybody enjoy SmackDown tonight. I'm sure it's going to be a wonderful tribute. If there's one thing that the WWE and other promotions do well at AEW with Brody Lee, they do tributes to the wrestlers very well. Jimmy, any final words for tonight before we check in again?
Any day next week after hours is fine with me. And rest in peace, Terry Funk, and rest in peace, Bray Wyatt. God bless us all.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.